They said the billionaire hated women, but no one was there the night he jumped into a dark river, just to bring one back to life. Before we begin, we want to appreciate your engagements on Ayana's story last Friday. She was impressed, overwhelmed, and extremely grateful for the experiences and insights shared. Tales Through Times loves you all very, very much. Another emotional true life story is coming up this week Friday, and we can't wait for another round of your full support and engagement. Kindly stay tuned. Now, let's begin. Caspian Hale did not hate women. He hated nothing. He felt everything, deeply, privately, and completely alone. But the world had written its version of him long before he could correct it, and after a while, he stopped trying. What the world saw was a 34-year-old billionaire who ran Hale Meridian, one of the most powerful private infrastructure firms in the country. Stone-faced in boardrooms, absent from social pages, never photographed with a woman, never photographed with anyone, actually, except Julian Mercer. Julian was his only friend, had been since they were 9 years old. They did everything together, and moved through the world with the specific ease of two people who had become each other's constants. Julian was the only person alive who could make Caspian Hale smile. A real smile, not the pressed professional courtesy he offered the rest of the world. So the building whispered, and the gossip columns speculated. And somewhere between observation and conclusion, a story was born. He hates women. He's gay. It's always been Julian. Nobody said it to Caspian's face. Nobody said it to Julian's either, though Julian had heard it several times from several people, and had done nothing to correct it, because correcting it would have required explaining things that were not his to explain. So the myth lived. He was gay. He and Julian were probably in love. Zariah Cole arrived on a Tuesday with a leather satchel, a recorder, and the energy of a woman who had made peace with being too much for certain rooms. She was 28. Deep brown skin that caught light like it had been warmly lit from the inside. Natural twists she wore like a crown. Sharp, beautiful, and constitutionally incapable of leaving a question half-asked. She had spent 3 weeks building a case against Hale Meridian's Port District facility. Wage manipulation, deleted hours, workers punished for complaining. It had all pointed up, all pointed at the name on the building. She published, and the headline was not kind. His lawyer called 4 hours later. Not with a threat. With an invitation. Her editor warned her not to go. But she went anyway, because Zariah Cole had never yet met a door she was afraid to walk through. She expected lawyers, walls of legal weight, a man who would speak without saying anything. What she got was Caspian Hale, alone, sitting across from her empty chair with a closed folder and no expression at all. He stood when she entered. Tall, dark-haired, eyes that shifted between gray and blue the way deep water does. He shook her hand, brief, professional, and sat back down and said simply, "You did your job well. You just didn't have all the facts." He opened the folder, slid documents across the table, one by one, unhurried. The audit trail his team had already built, the name of the actual culprit, the case already being built for legal referral. The fraud was real. The man behind it was his operations manager, not him. She read every page, looked up. "Then why let me come in here at all?" she asked. "You could have sent a statement." He held her gaze, and something moved through his eyes. Something that had no professional name. "Because I'd rather show you the truth," he said quietly, "than argue with you about it. For all I know, this could be a fabricated damage control. That's why I'm offering you an unhindered access to verify all these." He offered her 3 months inside the company. Full access. Her own office. No interference with whatever she published at the end. She accepted and started on Monday. What Zaraya didn't notice, not yet, was that when she turned to leave, Caspian Hale watched her go with the particular attention of a man who hadn't looked at anything that carefully in a very long time. Julian found her on her 4th day. Appeared in her doorway with 2 coffees, the confidence of someone who had decided they were already friends, and enough warmth to raise the temperature of the room by 2 degrees. "You're the journalist," he said. "I'm a journalist," she said. "Julian Mercer." He placed a coffee on her desk with the confidence of someone who had never once been told to put it back. Chief of Strategy. More accurately, the only person in this building who's gotten a full sentence out of Caspian in the last 3 years. She looked up at him. He had easy eyes and an easier smile, and the particular warmth of a person who was genuinely interested in the world. "He gave me quite a few in the conference room," she said. "That's remarkable." "I'm serious. Don't let it go to your head, but also definitely let it go to your head because it means something." She didn't ask what it meant. She should have. She liked him immediately. That was the problem. Because the more she liked Julian, the more she watched him. And the more she watched him, the more she saw. She saw the way Caspian transformed when Julian walked into a room. How the iron in his posture softened by degrees. How his eyes moved to Julian before they moved to anything else. How, twice in 1 week, Julian said something low and private, and Caspian's mouth curved into something that was almost a smile. She filed it all. Professionally, she was in the break room on a Wednesday when she heard the junior staff talking. Always been Julian, hasn't it? The man hasn't looked at a woman in years. Doesn't go to events. Doesn't date. And Julian is always there, always. They stopped when they noticed her, gathered their mugs, and left. Zaraya stood at the water cooler and let the pieces fall into place. It fit. It explained everything. The walls, the distance, the single point of warmth in a life that was otherwise sealed shut. A man who had given his heart to one person and closed every other door. She poured her glass, walked back to her office, sat down, and quietly, in the part of herself she wasn't fully ready to look at yet. Something that had been slowly growing over 4 days folded in on itself and became grief. She told herself to let it go. She was a professional. This was not her story. She didn't let it go. This time, she told herself it was a coincidence. She was walking down the 4th floor corridor toward the east stairwell when she heard Julian's voice ahead. Low, laughing, the particular cadence of someone telling a story he already knew the ending of. And Caspian's voice answering him with more words than she'd ever heard him use at once. She had slowed, rounded the corner. They were at the end of the hall by the windows, close together over something on a tablet. Julian pointing at the screen, Caspian leaning in to see. It was nothing. It was also the posture of 2 people who had spent 25 years learning each other's gravity. She turned around and took the west stairwell. She ran into Caspian in the lobby that afternoon. It was the first time she'd encountered him without a meeting structure around them, and she felt briefly and inconveniently the specific nervousness of a person who has been thinking about someone and then suddenly has to look at them. "Miss Cole, Mr. Hale." He fell into step beside her. Not obviously. They happened to be going the same direction. "How's the documentation access?" "Going. I almost have everything I need for the fraud piece." "Good." A pause. The kind that breathes. "You don't have to keep calling me Mr. Hale like everyone else," he said after a moment. "Everyone, except Julian," she said without thinking. "He calls you Cass." Something she couldn't name crossed his face. "Yes," he said. "He does." And there it was again. That specific softness. The exact kind of softness you use when you say a name that means something private. She heard it and catalogued it and felt the pieces locked together a little further. Here's the thing about Zariah Cole. She could not see a problem and do nothing. And this problem started exactly when she heard that Julian was engaged. She thought, Caspian Hale. Brilliant, beautiful, closed-off Caspian. Was a problem. He must be a man who loved someone and couldn't say it. He had built his entire existence around a feeling he'd never once been brave enough to name. She decided, because she was who she was, to help. She started gently with Julian. Can I ask you something? Always, he said. Do you know how Caspian feels about you? Do you actually know? Because someone should say something, Julian. Life is... Julian went very still. Are you? He said carefully, trying to tell me Caspian has romantic feelings toward me. I'm saying life is too short to... You think we're... Zariah, you think Caspian and I are... He could not finish the sentence. Whatever he was feeling had seized his capacity for speech. He pressed both hands to his face and breathed through them for a moment. Oh, Zariah said, very quietly, as the floor of something shifted under her. We grew up together, Julian managed from behind his hands. He's my brother. My actual. I would donate a kidney. But it would be deeply strange and extremely upsetting for both of us if... He dropped his hands. His eyes were bright. He's not gay, Zariah. The silence that followed lasted perhaps 4 seconds. It felt much longer. Oh, she said again, even more quietly. He's just... Julian's voice gentled, the laughter going somewhere else. Alone. He's just alone. Has been for a long time. She opened her mouth, closed it, said with tremendous effort, I see. Do you? Julian said. And the way he said it made it clear he was asking about something more than what she'd just learned. She left the building that evening 10 minutes early and sat in her car in the parking structure for 15 minutes, thinking. Julian was oblivious about Caspian's feelings. But just that he didn't know does not mean it's not there. Caspian had always had this longing look, especially around Julian. She should definitely try more before it's too late. Julian told Caspian that evening. He started with, you have a situation. And then he told him everything. Caspian had sat very still through all of it. When Julian finished, he said, she thought, yes. But why would she think that? I'd rather not guess. Another silence. And she was trying to. She was trying to help us get together, Julian confirmed, in the gentle tone of someone delivering both terrible and hilarious news. She was concerned about your happiness. Caspian pressed 2 fingers to his mouth, stared at the desk, and then quietly, privately, in a way he would never have permitted anyone else to see. He felt something warm turn over in his chest, something that had been very still for a very long time. I can't seem to stop thinking about her, or stop to find an excuse to always be around her, he said softly. What kind of funny feeling is that? You love her, Caspian. That is the funny feeling. But, he paused, took a breath, and looked into his friend's eyes. Julian, what do I do? He said. And the fact that he was asking, that was the thing, Julian thought. In 25 years, Caspian Hale had never once asked what to do about a person. Talk to her, Julian said simply. You lost your parents, he said. Gently, directly. The way only a person who has loved you for 25 years can say a thing like that. And you have been paying that debt ever since. Staying small, staying still. Not reaching for anything because reaching is what you were doing when the call came in. Caspian said nothing. She's not a casualty waiting to happen, Julian said. She is a person, and you are allowed to want her. The room was very quiet. I don't know how anymore, Caspian said. And in 25 years, it was the most honest thing Julian had ever heard him say. But Caspian, who had spent 17 years learning not to reach for things he was afraid to lose, said nothing to Zaraya. And Zaraya, who had been the oblivious one about who Caspian really wanted, who he had been longing for since she appeared in front of him, became more tenacious in hooking him up. She wants him happy. It almost became too late at a brunch that was Julian's idea. He framed it as a casual team thing. Himself, his fiancée Elise, Caspian, Zaraya. At a restaurant near the office. He told Caspian it would be good for him to be social. He told Zaraya it would be good for her to get out of the building. He told Elise it was nothing in particular, and she had looked at him with the specific expression she reserved for, when she knew he was lying but had decided to let it play out. Elise Marlowe was tall and composed, with the precise bearing of a woman who was used to holding a room's attention without asking for it. She had known Julian for 4 years, which meant she had known about Caspian for 4 years, which meant she had heard, many times, the story of a boy who had grown into a man who had sealed himself off from the world and left only one door open. She had never expected the door to be tested by someone like Zaraya Cole. The food was good. The conversation was easy. And then, halfway through her second coffee, Zaraya said the thing she'd been quietly building toward for a week. Because she was Zaraya, and once she'd decided something needed to be said, it got said. So, Zaraya said, clapping her hands lightly as she leaned forward, already smiling, already scheming in that effortless way of hers. I've decided something. Julian groaned under his breath. That never ends well. She ignored him. You two, she pointed between him and Caspian, are going out tonight. Caspian looked up slowly from his coffee, his expression neutral, but there was a flicker in his eyes. Confusion, maybe. Or curiosity. Out? He repeated. Yes. Movie. Something normal. Something that doesn't involve boardrooms and silence and whatever it is you two do all day. Julian snorted. We work. Barely, she shot back. Then, leaning in slightly, her tone softened. Persuasive now, almost conspiratorial. You need it. Both of you. Caspian's gaze shifted to her then. And there it was again. That quiet, searching look. You're coming? He asked, almost before he could stop himself. The question hung there. Small, unplanned, but heavier than it should have been. Zaraya blinked, just for a second. Then she smiled. Bright, deflecting, easy. No, she said lightly. This one's not for me. And before anyone could question it, before that moment could stretch into something more revealing, Elise spoke. I'll come, she said gently, glancing between them. It sounds nice. The shift was immediate. Zaraya straightened, her smile tightening just slightly. Oh, no, she said, almost too quickly. Not like that. Elise's brows drew together. What do you mean? Zaraya waved a hand, as though it was obvious. It's just 2 tickets for them. There was a beat of silence. Julian's expression changed first, the humor slipping just a little. Zaraya. But she kept going, unaware of the line she had just crossed. You don't have to be attached to him all the time, she added, her tone still light, still teasing, but edged now with something sharper. Let them breathe a little. That did it. Elise stood, not dramatically, but with a quiet finality that made the air shift. I'm not attached, she said, her voice controlled but hurt, flickering just beneath it. I'm his fiancée. Zaraya's smile faltered. I didn't mean... No, Elise cut in, shaking her head once. You've made it very clear what you meant. Her gaze lingered on Zaraya for just a moment longer. Not angry, not cruel, just disappointed. Then she turned and walked out. The silence she left behind was heavier than any argument. Julian exhaled slowly, dragging a hand down his face before looking at Caspian. That look said everything. "I told you so." Caspian didn't respond, but something in his posture tightened. Julian stood quickly. "I need to fix this." He paused just long enough to glance at Zaraya. Not harshly, but firmly. "You should think about what you're actually doing," he said quietly. Then he followed Elise out. And just like that, Zaraya was left alone with Caspian. The room felt different now. Too quiet. Too exposed. "I didn't mean to upset her," she said finally, her voice softer now, uncertain in a way it hadn't been before. Caspian didn't answer immediately. He was watching her, not coldly, but with something far more difficult to face. "You don't think before you speak sometimes," he said at last. There was no anger in it, but there was truth. Zaraya let out a small, defensive laugh. "I was just trying to help." His brow furrowed slightly. "Help? What?" She hesitated, and for the first time, she realized how ridiculous it might sound out loud. "You?" she said finally, gesturing vaguely. "And Julian." Something in his expression shifted. "You think I'm in love with him?" he said. It wasn't a question. Zaraya held his gaze. "Aren't you?" The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of things he could say, of truths he could give her, of a confession that had been sitting just beneath his restraint for days now, growing and aching to be known. "I'm in love with someone, but it's not Julian." He could tell her. Right there. He could end it. End the misunderstanding. End the distance. End the quiet way she kept placing herself outside of something she was already deeply inside. But fear is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply stronger. So instead he looked away and said nothing. Walking to the car afterward, Caspian fell into step beside her. Just for a moment, she couldn't look at him. "That was my fault," he said quietly. "Not yours." She looked up, but he was already looking away. She threw herself back into the work. That was what she did with feelings she couldn't sit with. And deep in the financial architecture of Hale Meridian, she found something that had not been there when she started looking. Not the wage fraud. Something older, quieter. A diversion of funds through subsidiary accounts, patient and deliberate and running for 11 years. Beneath every infrastructure contract, beneath every clean audit, beneath the name of a man who had been on the founding board since before Caspian was old enough to inherit the company. Edmund Ashby. She copied the files to her drive on a Thursday afternoon, not yet understanding what she'd done. What she'd done was pull a thread that had been watching for anyone who might find it. By Thursday evening, Edmund Ashby knew her name. She went to Julian the next morning with her laptop and a look that told him something had shifted. She showed him what she'd found. He listened. His face changed. And then, before she could say another word, he held up a hand. "Before you go to him," Julian said, "there's something you need to know." Then he told her about what made Caspian lonely. She had never seen Julian look like this. The ease completely drained from his face, replaced by something old and careful. "He was 17 when he lost his parent," Julian said. "They were supposed to go on the yacht together. The whole family. A summer trip. He and his mother had argued the night before. Something small. So he stayed home to prove a point. And the storm came in, and the yacht capsized. And he got a phone call on a Tuesday morning that rewrote every single thing he understood about what it meant to be alive, all by himself." Zaraya was very still. It was the argument that saved his life, Julian said. But he has been living inside that guilt for 17 years. He loved swimming the most, but that's why he can never be near water or go near the coast since that incident. He even rerouted his walk to avoid the reservoir on the South Campus. He sealed himself off because sealing yourself off is the only way to make sure you don't lose anything else. Her throat was tight. But then you walked in, Julian said quietly, and he forgot to stay sealed. She looked at Julian. He loves you, Zariah. I know what that looks like on him. I'm the only one who's ever seen it, and that's what it looks like. The words sat in the room between them like something physical. That's impossible. It is, he told me himself. She picked up her laptop and stood up. I'm going to go tell him what I found, she said. I know, Julian said. And after? She was already at the door. After, she said softly, we will talk about the other things. She never made it to his office. At the parking structure at midday, keys in hand, moving fast, the way she always moved when she had somewhere to be. They came from behind the pillar on her left. 2 men. Practiced. Fast. Her bag was gone before she registered the loss. Her wrist caught before she could run. She fought. She always fought. But the cloth came down over her face, and the chemical dark arrived, and the last thing she sensed was the smell drifting through the concrete gaps. Julian found her car first. He'd been eager to know the outcome of their conversation. He needed to know if his friend would finally be happy, or condemned to live a monk life all his days. He had been calling her, and when she wasn't responding, he'd gone looking. He found her car where she'd parked it. Her jacket on the passenger seat, placed too neatly, the way a jacket is placed when you're running an errand and not planning to be long. Her phone on the floor by the pedals, face down. He stared at the phone for 1 full second. Then he called Caspian. He used a specific tone, low and controlled, that Caspian had learned over 25 years to associate with serious things. The kind of tone Julian used when things were genuinely wrong, and he did not want to create panic before there was a plan. I need you in the parking structure, Julian said. Now. Caspian arrived in 4 minutes. He looked at the jacket. He looked at the phone. And something changed in his face that Julian had not seen in 17 years. Not alarm. It was the particular expression of a man whose body has recognized catastrophe before his mind has named it, and who is, underneath the composure, terrified. Find her, he said. Quiet. Absolute. For 3 hours, Caspian Hale moved through the search the way he moved through everything that mattered, without stopping, without sitting, without ever letting the feeling reach his face. He pulled footage. He called contacts most people didn't know he had. He traced the car she was took in, frame by frame, road by road, until his security analyst looked up from a monitor and said the word that made the entire room go still. They're heading towards the river, sir. Caspian heard it. He had not been near a river in 17 years, but he was already moving. The bridge was old concrete and rusted railing at the edge of the warehouse district, and the river beneath it ran wide and dark in the last of the afternoon light. Caspian saw her before Julian did. 2 men at the railing. One smaller figure between them, hands bound, feet bound, head still up. Still up, even now, even here, because of course she was still fighting. Of course she was. Her only saving grace was that they had to stop and interrogate her, who she had told about the files she pulled up. You won't get a thing from me. She spat on the face of one of them. Then they moved. That forward tilt of weight, deliberate and final. She went over as the men hurriedly got back in the car and drove off. The sound of the river receiving her was the quietest, most violent sound Caspian Hale had ever heard in his life. Julian was already at them. Embankment stairs, pulling off his jacket, saying something. Caspian's name. And Caspian looked at the river. Dark water. Moving. Cold. He stood at the railing for 1 full second. He felt everything he had always felt when he looked at water. He was 17 again, on a Tuesday morning, holding a phone, understanding for the first time that some things cannot be undone. He felt all of it. And then he felt something louder. He cleared the railing without stopping. The cold was total. Punishing. The kind that tells your body immediately how serious it is. He dove, and the current pulled against him, and he pulled back harder, down and forward, into the dark, toward the place where she had gone. And he found her by touch, the fabric of her blouse, her stillness, the terrible weight of her. He kicked. Every muscle. Up. They broke the surface, and air had never been so violent or so necessary, and he got his arm under her chin and made for the embankment while Julian ran the bridge above, and the current pushed, and he pushed back, and he did not stop, because there was no version of this where he stopped. He hauled her out onto the grass. Julian pulled her the last foot. They laid her down, and the sky above was going gray, and her lips were the color of winter, and her chest was not moving. Caspian knelt, hands on her sternum, 30 compressions, steady and rhythmic and relentless. And then he tilted her chin and breathed for her, and said things he had no memory of deciding to say. Words that came up from somewhere below thought, below composure, below the 17 years of careful silence. Don't. 5th compression. Don't you dare. Breath. Zariah. 10th compression. Zariah. Please. 15th compression. I have not been in water since I was 17. Breath. I didn't think about it. When I saw you thrown over, I didn't think about it. Which means 25th compression. Which means you matter more than the fear. You matter more than all of it. So please. She choked. River water. Air. She turned to her side and coughed and coughed and coughed, and the sound of it. Ragged and real and alive. Broke something open in Caspian Hale's chest that had been sealed shut for a very, very long time. He sat back on his heels and pressed his sleeve to his mouth. His eyes were closed. His hands were shaking. Julian, 6 feet away, said nothing. Did nothing. Let the moment be exactly what it was. She was still on her side, still coming back, still shaking, when she turned her face and found him. He was soaking wet and undone and looking at her with nothing managed, nothing controlled. Just everything true. She had never seen his face like that, without the glass in front of it. Caspian, she said. Her voice was still water rough. He exhaled. I've been trying to say something to you for 2 months, he said. I kept deciding the timing was wrong, that I'd get it wrong, that it was safer to... He stopped, shook his head. You are the only reason I would do it again for. The river moved. The evening came in. Zariah looked at this man. This sealed-off, terrified, enormous-hearted man who had just given her the most open thing he had left inside him. And she sat up. He started to say something. She kissed him. Not softly. Not with caution. The way you kiss someone when you've held back for 3 months and almost didn't get the chance to stop. He went still for half a second. The old reflex. The closed door. Then it gave way. He kissed her back with everything below the surface. Both hands around her face, cold and river wet, holding her like the thing he had been afraid to hold, and was never letting go of again. And there was nothing measured in it. Nothing managed. Just him, finally, with nothing between himself and what he felt. Julian Mercer looked at the opposite bank of the river and thought, quietly, about two 9-year-old boys, running barefoot on a summer lawn, one of them laughing at everything, the other already learning the particular art of stillness. He thought about what it costs a person to come back from loss and keep finding reasons to stay. He thought, every single bit of it is worth it. Edmund Ashby was arrested on a Monday. The 11-year diversion scheme, Soraya's files, the forensic trail Caspian's legal team built from them. It was the kind of case that ends careers and begins consequences. The story Soraya published was the most important of her life. She accepted the praise. They were engaged and got married the following autumn. 20 people. No performance. She wore deep green, her twists crowned with small gold. He wore his most open face, the one the world had never gotten to see, because the world had never been let close enough. At the altar, Caspian looked at Soraya the way he'd been looking at her since the beginning, when he'd told himself it was professional interest and almost believed it. Like she was weather he hadn't seen before. Like she was the answer to a question he hadn't known how to ask. She looked back the way she always did, like a woman who already knew the answer and was asking anyway, because some things deserved to be said out loud. Julian cried happily, said he almost couldn't believe his gay friend would get married before him. Elise held his hand through all of it, and at the exact right moment, she squeezed it once. He squeezed back. And Caspian Hale, the man the world had decided for, the man who had spent 17 years going without, rather than risk losing again, reached for the woman in front of him. He did not let go.